Thank you very much. So as we said today, we're going to go through international expansion, what it means for merchants. And we're going to cover four major topics today. And we have different panelists today that'll introduce themselves in a minute. But what I wanted to do is talk about those four major things. So international expansion is obviously a great opportunity for many merchants in the US, and certainly a very appealing market. And certainly where to start is a lot of the questions many merchants asked. The second thing that we see a lot in international, if you think the state regulations in the US across states is complicated, once you get into international, it becomes even more complex, and regulations change quite a bit. And we were just having a couple of side conversations here about taxation and things like that, and getting money out of markets and local acquiring. So those are all topics certainly that we're willing to address today. And lastly, but important, is the fraud aspect of it. As we mentioned, I was at a certified, and certainly at Cardinal, we see that a lot today. Fraud is a major aspect, and a lot of merchants start sending international, and many of them tell me after that, you know what, I've shut down international, I was 40% fraud, and it's just shipping outside the US is just too risky. So those are all topics that I hear that probably resonate with some of you if you've tried or if you've spoken to people. And certainly today we're here to address that. There are ways, there's many companies out there that have been incredibly successful at that. Most of them didn't go about it by themselves. They went about it with the help of companies such as the ones that are represented here, which we're going to introduce in a second. So the other aspect as well of international is that B2B and B2C can be very different, and especially if you're more in the B2B space, I know Andrew here will be able to cover some of those aspects as well. So in a nutshell, I'll tell you a little bit about Cardinal Commerce, and then I'll let the others introduce themselves. So Cardinal Commerce, what we do is we have about 97 alternative payments that represent different markets around the world. Obviously in the US, a majority of payments remain credit cards, and a lot of merchants, wrongfully so, think that that's the case across the world. In certain markets like Germany, credit cards actually only represent 25% of the business, and there's many other alternative payments. So with Cardinal, we just try and normalize that to make it very easy. And the other piece of what Cardinal does is authentication and seamless technology. So we have the largest authentication network globally, present in about 200 countries, with over 60,000 global merchants using it. Some of the largest retailers, airline, and gamers use our network for authenticating their cardholders. So those are the major themes of Cardinal, and certainly if you want to find out more, feel free to ask any questions. After that, I'm going to ask the other panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Britta.
Thank you. So my name is Britta Eriksson from Euro VAT Refund. We're located in Los Angeles, and we help American companies and North American companies with value-added tax when they trade around the world, in particular into the European Union. So value-added tax is an implemented tax in almost every country in the world except United States, Jamaica, and a few other countries in Arabia. So if you want to sell to any country except Jamaica and these few countries in Arabia, you will have to deal and learn about the VAT. And when you ship in products to any of these countries, European Union, Africa, China, Argentina, whatever it goes, what's going to happen with the VAT, first of all, is that when it comes to customs in these countries will assess duty, as you all expect them to do. But in addition, they will also assess 15 to 25% in VAT. And that is a cost that should never, ever, ever be a cost to a company, but it is a customer to the private person. So the company in US that do trade international need to be aware, because in addition to this being a cost that you need to understand and control and know how to get back if you can get it back, you also need to understand what it means in the price to your final customer, and you also need to understand when it is a legal liability for you. That is, for example, the case when you ship into a warehouse in these countries and you own the product in the warehouse and then sell it on. It is a legal liability when you, for example, use a fulfillment warehouse like Amazon. You ship into the fulfillment warehouse in UK, for example. It requires you to be registered for that and charge that. And so it's a legal liability in addition to a cost that you need to understand how it works, how it affects your sales, and how to minimize it and control and stay legal.
So Britta, just one further clarification question for that. I know some people here have, obviously it's the very first time they hear about that or they're fairly new to this. How does a company go about paying the VAT? How does it work?
So how the VAT works, if you compare to the sale tax in the US, the sale tax we have in the US is only applied to goods, not to services. VAT is also assessed to services. How the sale tax work in US basically is that if you're a company that buy and sell products, you only pay sale tax on things that you will use, such as your office supply and so forth. You don't pay any sale tax on things that you will sell. When you sell in the United States, you only charge sale tax if you sell to an end user, not if you're going to resell. But VAT does not work like that. In the countries of VAT, for example, in the United Kingdom, the UK company will pay VAT on everything, regardless if they're going to resell it or not. So that's why they also pay VAT on things that they import. They will pay VAT right away on that product. Then they will sell the products within the United Kingdom and they will charge VAT to absolutely everyone. And at the end of the day, they do a VAT declaration to the tax authorities, and there they will declare all the VAT that they have collected from all their customers, and against that they can deduct the VAT that they have paid. So in the end, it is not a cost to the company, but it is a it's a cost to the private person who buys. So if you sell B2C, the VAT will end up as a cost to your private customer, but not to any company really. So that is a major difference, and that's how it works in all the countries, really.
Great, thank you very much. So your company really can help the merchants there and take care of everything for them?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Right, thank you. Andrew.
Sir. My name is Andrew Sokol. I'm with escrow.com. I'm located here in Dallas, so I want to make a shout out to the Texas Rangers who are taking the field about now. So, I do have more to say about that. That would be baseball for people not from this country. Anyway, escrow.com, we've been in business since 1999. We are really an alternative method of payment. We focus more on the business-to-business transactions. There's a lot of opportunities out there when you look at trying to sell or export things. The problem is, depending on what country you're going to, depending on the banks that are being used, depending on who your client is, or depending on the atmosphere of the country that you're going to, you may not be able to use a letter of credit or another type of payment service available. We act as another tool in the toolkit. We're really cash in advance on steroids, where we hold the funds until both sides of the transaction are satisfied. We are a U.S. Commercial Services strategic partner. We have been since 2012. We work in concert with a lot of the other partners in putting on programs, and we're just very excited to be here.
Right, thank you very much. Lisa.
Hi, I'm Lisa Roboski, and I'm from PayPal. You may have heard of it. We have 169 million active customers, so it is definitely something that's quite popular. Definitely the US is the largest market, but we are in 203 markets. So different countries have different capabilities, and we're continuing to expand and offer more and more options to service our merchant community and consumer community as well. We recently started trading on the stock market under PYPL on July 20th when we broke away from eBay. And so a lot of the original basis of how we acquired most of our customers started off from our eBay parent company, but now it was becoming such a smaller footprint aspect, and it's giving us opportunities to work with more and more platforms, more merchants, and provide new and innovative services. And so cross-border as well as domestic payment options in different markets is something we've definitely been doing for a number of years, as well as continuing to innovate and to drive new strategies that can really drive e-commerce, cross-border trade, and have a lot of knowledge in the different areas that Alistair has mentioned that are going to be pain points for certain areas that people are going into new.
So, Lisa, further, why should a merchant consider PayPal as they're sort of thinking about their form of payment? They usually obviously think of Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, but why PayPal?
So PayPal offers all of those different payment methods within it. We have a couple different avenues that a merchant can consider, whether it's a very small merchant that wants to not have to be tied to any PCI compliance requirements. We can do that for them, offering the trust that those 169 million active customers have chosen to use PayPal. That's an available capability. But those that maybe are more sophisticated and want to do direct credit card or want to take local payment methods, they can also do that in unbranded flows. So there's a number of different experiences we offer. Some where you see the PayPal button prominently featured, or the PayPal app for the payment. But there's also a number of different payments that we're processing behind the scenes that consumers are not aware of that we're involved. And that's through some of our direct credit card programs. Another entity we acquired, which is Braintree, which is heavily known for the direct credit card acceptance market. And through that, you can even actually offer things such as Apple Pay. There's even Bitcoin. So it's really about making it a one-stop shop for merchants to be able to service their customers. That's our goal. And so there can be a lot of different options of flexibility, as well as even an opportunity for working capital loans as well.
Right. And you guys offer a credit product as well, right?
We do.
Is that only in the US or globally or certain markets?
It's in certain markets. The US is definitely where it started. It was originally Bill Me Later that became PayPal Credit, and we've extended to a working capital product that is to offer small business loans through a bank provider, and it gives a really great experience for merchants that often couldn't get it through other avenues without going to extremely costly service providers. And so that is started in the US. We have launched it in the UK as well as in Australia, and I would say that the popularity and growth will continue to look at new markets to expand as we continue to understand what customers need and test all the regulatory requirements in the different markets.
Great. Thank you very much. Ali.
Thank you. So I am Ali 80, and I work for MasterCard. I've been at MasterCard for the last 5 years. I don't think MasterCard needs the same introduction. I would guess that most of you, if not all of you, probably have at least one MasterCard card in your wallets or purses. I will say that we are a global network, and we do not issue the cards, and we're not just a card network anymore. We don't issue the cards, we do process, meaning we switch the transactions to and from the banks, to and from the merchants, and we add a lot of value-added services in between. We also process a lot of evolving and emerging types of transactions nowadays. And we work with different technologies, and we actually advance and evolve and define a lot of technologies for the industry. I have the privilege of overseeing MasterCard's e-commerce interests in the Latin America region. And in addition to that, as part of that responsibility, I also have accountability over our authentication programs in the same region.
Great. Can you explain a little bit more what that means, the authentication, and then also go into what MasterCard is doing specifically to help merchants who want to sell internationally? Because I know you guys have a lot of programs. Maybe you can give one or two examples of those.
Sure, let's take it one at a time. So authentication, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is the science of identifying and validating the identity of the person behind that card, of someone's identity. And that's normally in the field of risk management. That's established by one of three methods. It's usually who you are, what you know, or what you have. One or more, or one, two, or all three of those factors on different dimensions can be used to establish your identity. We work with our issuers, we work with our merchants, and with the different players within the payments ecosystem to help establish that identity at the moment of the transaction. That elevates confidence in the transaction itself. We actually work very closely with Cardinal Commerce as the largest provider of this kind of technology for the online space on the merchant side. And that technology for the last 12, 13 years has been known as 3D Secure on the protocol level. We've been very involved with that, and now that whole technology is in transformation and is in evolution. So where that's headed is where you might be familiar with pop-up windows and a sort of a friction, a process that's been full of friction for the customers and for the cardholders to be able to authenticate themselves and validate their identities. Where this is all headed is biometrics, one-time passwords, and essentially silent authentication, where they don't even realize that their identity is being validated behind the scenes.
That's great.
I'm not sure what the second question was now, I forgot.
Things that MasterCard's doing to help merchants expand internationally.
There are a number of initiatives, specifically within the e-commerce space. I think I can point to initiatives with banks to tokenize card on file information for the merchants. So everything is an ecosystem, right? When you move to the digital world, and in fact, anything having to do with payments, it's an ecosystem play. You have to solve for both sides simultaneously. We're looking at card on file initiatives, multiple initiatives, in fact, within the card on file space to make sure that merchants are able to store information about their customers, but in a safe and secure way so that they're protected and the cardholders are protected. We are working with our banks to increase credit limits to target specific consumer segments and offer specific products on a much more granular level to the needs of those customer segments. We're working to involve new merchant verticals. We're working to, there are multiple initiatives, and I think we can talk through it. I mean, I could take up a whole hour.
No, that's fine. That's great. No, it's great. So merchants understand that. And the reason I'm asking is because merchants aren't typically used to dealing with MasterCard. They typically deal with their acquirer, their processor, their gateway. And so it's good for them to hear that there is the entity behind the scenes doing the work for them. So I want to pause here to see if there are any questions from the audience before we move into a little bit more detail around what payments in what region, etc. Any questions? Yes. I think we have a mic.
Yes, Gus.
By the Africa Business Portal. I have a question related to Africa. Because of past fraud in a few countries, there's payment black holes as it relates to credit cards. The credit card usage isn't high in Africa, much more payments with phones and other things. If you're transacting online today in Africa, which of your resources may be applicable?
So what you're asking is, obviously Africa is a high fraud market. That said, there are a lot of very affluent people as well. And how do you make sure as a merchant that you capitalize on the opportunity without getting murdered with fraud? Okay. So I'll start answering, and then certainly feel free to chime in, any of you who want to. So I think firstly, credit card usage is mostly for the affluent people. The banks in Africa have done a pretty good job at working very closely with their acquirer to step up authentication. And I think that's where what Ali was talking about earlier, some of what the banks have done is really guaranteeing some of these transactions to the merchant. So one of the benefits of doing 3D Secure is that you as a merchant are no longer liable for that transaction for fraud specifically. So if that transaction turns out to be fraudulent, the issuer of the card would be liable for that transaction and not you as the merchant. And that's really important because these banks in specific countries, like we see that a lot in places like Nigeria, but there's a whole big affluent population, and they do want to go to Best Buy and buy 15 flat screen TVs because they can't get them locally, and they are having them shipped from the US. And so those are, those banks obviously want to satisfy their card members and certainly want to guarantee those transactions because they know the funds are available. So I think that's the first piece, is ensuring that you do some form of authentication for those markets and make sure that you shift the liability to issue the card. Who's going to know a lot more about that card member and about that market and know that, yes, they do shop at US merchants all the time, even though it's the first time they shop at you, and the three last transactions you saw from Nigeria were all fraudulent. So it's a very good way to do it. The second is localized payments. There's more and more payments that are not credit card related, and obviously they're very market specific, and actually that does tell nicely into the next piece of our conversation. I touched upon that in my introduction, but as you move further and further away from the US, the credit cards are always going to be there, and there's always going to be this international affluent population that's going to have a credit card. So I think pretty much in every country, Ali just said everyone here has a MasterCard, and I think across the globe that's probably a true statement, certainly in the upper class. I think once you get into more everyday people, and especially the unbanked, you have to go into alternative payments. Some of those alternative payments are guaranteed payments. So I'm thinking of Bitcoins and payments like that. Those are guaranteed. There is no way to charge back a payment. It's like giving someone cash. You give someone cash, unless you chase them down the street, you're not getting your money back. And so it works the same way. So you've got to, as a merchant, look at what forms of payments those specific countries in which you want to do business operate in, which ones are secure, which ones are not, and then adapt your strategy to that.
I would add that in the PayPal case, we actually have our seller protection on a number of our transaction offerings, and so we just recently opened up Nigeria about a year ago. So there, we do not have the full Africa covered, but there are different countries there that we've definitely opened up, and so that is something, if that's a market you're interested in, having that as an option for your customers is something you can consider. It's similar to what Alistair was saying, is having an authentication kind of layer in place, and so for the branded PayPal transactions, we support it. And it's something that most merchants can qualify. There's a few exceptions, but in general, it definitely it opens up an ability for you to ship to different countries that you may otherwise have felt uncomfortable about before.
I think Andrew will probably have some interesting things to add here. I would also like to add a couple things. At MasterCard, if you use our 3D secure solution to authenticate a customer, we have a global rule. As long as the merchant attempts to use that solution, as long as it requests authentication through our network for the cardholder, it doesn't matter whether the bank completes the authentication or not. Globally, you have chargeback protection rates. So that's one approach. Now that's a feasible approach for most most people in this room, I think, and for most transactions. If it's a MasterCard transaction, I can't speak on behalf of Visa, but that's one approach. Another approach is if you look at certain, there are a breed of platforms that are out there. Ones that come to mind are Border-Free, Trade Global, and Global ShopX. They come to mind. Okay, what they do is they basically are experts in logistics management, payment processing, and shopping cart integration. So they merge, they integrate with your shopping carts and with your checkout pages. And as part of what they have is they have connectivity globally, and some of them also have this for B2B as well. So they give you chargeback protection and fraud protection as part of the package that they offer you. And they give you they give the customers localized shopping experiences. They give you currency conversion on the fly. They give, as part of that localized shopping experience, they provide a fully landed cost to your customers on your checkout page. So the customer knows exactly how much they're going to pay, and they get their product shipped right to their door. And for you, it's as though you're shipping domestically. Now, it comes at a higher cost, so you have to do your ROI analysis. You have to make sure there's a business case for what you're going to do. But that's another type of a solution that you can explore. I think at the end of the day, there is some common business sense that comes first, right? E-commerce is a business channel. It is not a net that you throw wide and say, I'm going to go after everybody, and by virtue of having access to e-commerce, I am going to be a solution provider for every solution to everybody all over the world. You still have to do your business case, you still have to do market sizing, you still have to make sure you have proper customer segments in proper markets, and that it makes sense to go after a certain segment and be differentiated in some way. If you have that, then you need to do an analysis and say, do I have an ROI behind it? And so, you know, maybe you've done that for whatever country in Africa you're thinking about, but I think some people just say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to open up, and anyone from anywhere in the domain known as the internet can come at me and request, and I should be able to ship to them my products. And maybe that's not the right mindset, to be quite honest. I don't know, Andrew, what
well, I think no matter across the board, whatever country you're in escrow service, it really would depend on the size of the ticket. But at the end of the day, what we would do as an escrow service is we would just hold the funds while you ship it. Once the receiver received the items and they approved it, then you would get the funds. I think part of the biggest issue, and I think you're kind of answering some of these questions great, but where would someone go and find, you were talking about, look at alternative payments in that country. Where would they go? Would they go to their acquirer? Would they go to Cardinal Commerce? Where would they go to find who they might want to accept if they don't know that today?
Yeah, so I think Cardinal's certainly a place to go. We offer lots of them. Their acquirers is another place to go. I think that it's so market specific that no one has one answer. I don't think there's one place to go, unfortunately. Maybe that's a new venture that someone should take on. But today, really what you have to look at is each market has their 3 or 4 payment brands, usually one major one aside from a credit card brand that's going to be supported. A Cardinal will be supporting most of the large European and South American ones, the e-banks of the world. And obviously the ones that tend to be more global, like Bitcoins. But certainly even us or others, when you get into some payment brands in Zimbabwe or places like that, you're going to have to go a little bit more specialized to be able to have access to those.
And one important thing is the capabilities to go local in some cases actually require your company to have a legal entity in that country. So sometimes knowing that it's available isn't actually going to work unless you are localizing. And so for a lot of the different local providers, you're going to have a local physical address, a local bank account. You're going to have to pay taxes in that jurisdiction and so forth. So it's really trying to understand what you want. And so there's the ubiquitous option of basically being able to accept cards or certain types of funding instruments from a local provider, or a local consumer in whatever domestic market you want to do, versus localizing to the domestic network or carrier in that market. So that's something important to think about. If you're going really deep as far as having a lot of volume there, you may need to go to that entity format. But if you're just doing this as an occasional sale, or it's to try to grow or expand, then some of those local methods are not always going to be relevant for you.
So, Britta, coming back to you, obviously we've just spoken about tax. I know high level there's a lot of implications when you go into those markets and start going localized. What does a merchant need to know from a sales tax VAT standpoint, especially Africa, since that seems to be a market of interest or region of interest for certain U.S. merchants?
Yeah, I can say that, generally speaking, again, if you go in and want to put stock in that, own products in that market before you sell on, such as an African country or Argentina or somewhere. Generally speaking, in those countries, you're not allowed to do that to register, but only you really do need to register as a company there and sell on. So that is if you don't sell it to a local partner in that country who sells it on. In European Union, in Australia, for example, it is possible to go in and own goods and sell it on. That is actually a benefit for those markets where you can do that. You can own the products and sell them on, and you register for this VAT only and charge VAT. But other markets, such as Africa, for example, or South America or Asia, that is usually not possible. So you have to find a partner one way or another there if you're really going to stock your products in that country and sell them on. Greg speaking.
And also, aside from the tax implication, my understanding is certain countries it's also difficult to get your money out of those countries. Is that something you've heard as well?
Yeah, that can be too. That in particular Africa, then they can have a problem too. The VAT is not supposed to be a cost for you, but in Africa that can also be an issue. That you're not supposed to, but it's kind of hard to get your money back there. So that's, yes, that can be the case as opposed to the other countries.
Good.
Yeah.
Does that answer most of your question? Any other question? I saw some hands being raised. Yes?
Questions?
I think it's on.
It's on. This question is from Lisa and Ali. We're spending a lot of time looking at online purchasing data for different product categories. We're also talking with groups like ComScore, Forrester, Nielsen, Prism for consumer segmentation, consumer demographic information. Our challenge is that so much of this information now in both areas is sample driven. And I'm wondering if PayPal and MasterCard, because you're in the transactional side of the business, as a value add, is sharing more information about consumer online activity, product category usage, pricing ranges for certain areas of merchandise. Can we come to you in the future for these value-added research needs on both the consumer and also online usage?
So I can say that I know PayPal commissioned a study about a year ago which really looked at cross-border corridors. And it looked at where things were importing and exporting and highlighting where the activity we saw. It did not go down to a pricing level or a specific product level like you're mentioning, but it definitely showed where entities would transact in both import and export across the globe. And it was pretty significant. I'd be happy to share with Paul Pullman from the group here, and he can make it available.
In the same way that you have pains when it comes to international acquirers, processors, payment methods, and there's a smorgasbord of all kinds of things going on. We also find that it can be problematic, at least in my region, I can speak on behalf of my own region, we find that it can be problematic to measure very accurately some of the data that you're talking about. And the reason is, we don't necessarily switch 100% of all the transactions in some of these markets. Some of the banks, essentially what they've done, the markets are dominated by a handful of banks. And what they've done is locally they've established switches, local switches, and acquiring processors. And so what they do is they read the card hand data as it's coming through, and they say, these belong to us, why send it through Visa or MasterCard or the global networks? So we're largely invisible to a lot of what happens. And as a result, believe it or not, we, and I believe Visa as well, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I believe Visa as well, we rely on ComScore for a lot of that intelligence and competitive data because they are able to see things and directionally, maybe it's not 100% accurate, but they're able to see things directionally and guide us. We also commission a lot of our own studies. We have a market intelligence and market insights and consumer insights team. And we commission a lot of our own studies to gain our own intelligence based on consumer engagement in the markets, based on large focus groups and panels. So We do come up with certain data. I can probably share some of what I know throughout the day today, and even engage with you separately afterwards. I'm not sure how much of that data we would make publicly available, to be honest with you, but that's the reality of the markets in which we play.
I'll give a little plug actually on MasterCard. They have some of the best data analysis in their spending rules. Data that they have, I know that's a fee service option, but it is definitely some of the top data and what they look at as far as being able to project things. I know a lot of Wall Street analysts look at it as well.
But again, I'd be happy to have a separate conversation with you after this panel is over.
Absolutely. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Yes, I think we had another question back here. Yes, hold on, wait for a mic.
Mike's right behind you.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to have to ask the gentleman from MasterCard to just put his hand over his ears for a moment while I ask this question. Those that have MasterCard and or a Visa, there must be a difference between those two companies in terms of PayPal and in terms of the other incredible representatives that are on the panel. Can you please comment on that?
So you want to know the difference between the card networks?
Internationally, between the two credit cards.
I want to make sure I understand the question.
Internationally, what is the difference between the two companies? Is kind of what she's asking.
Is one accepted more than the other? Is one easier for merchants to deal with internationally?
So you're asking, so here's what we see. Obviously, one thing I can say is the beauty of Pleanary is we see all payment methods, no matter what the brand is, across, as I said, over 60,000 merchants in 200 countries. It really depends on who the issuers are in those countries and which deals the issuers have signed. Some markets are heavier MasterCard, like Germany is a heavier MasterCard. I think MasterCard is larger than Visa there. UK, Visa is larger than MasterCard. It's really specific. The other big thing in international, which Ali was talking about, is there are these localized networks. So for instance, in France, and I'm French, so I can speak about that, there's a network called Carte Bancaire, which obviously the issuers prefer to ride that network because it's the cheaper alternative. And obviously if that network fails or anything like that, they rerun, all of the cards are dual, they're rerun on the MasterCard or Visa rails. But I would say generally, I rarely see a merchant that accepts one without the other. So I never see a merchant that only takes Visa, aside from these big co-brand deals, and we all know what they are. I would say probably 99.9% of merchants take Visa MasterCard, and I didn't realize I thought it was all one word.
Yeah.
But most people talk about Visa MasterCard as one. American Express tends to be a little bit more spotty, but those two I really don't see a difference as far. Obviously there's regulatory differences, there's differences in the way they treat authentication, there's differences in the way they treat chargebacks, etc.
I totally agree with what you said there. American Express definitely has coverage in certain markets, which is very strong, but internationally it is quite spotty overall as far as coverage.
It's new to TD.
Yeah, you never have merchants say, I don't want one or the other with the MasterCard or Visa. The exceptions are, as you mentioned, where it's very high-end, usually deals that were made, or you'll find it's a merchant that has been selling counterfeits or violating products that's been asked to remove a particular brand and the other one hasn't caught it yet. That's what I see. The big difference though is Visa is broken up for Visa Europe and Visa Inc. So you do have that separation that's very different, where MasterCard's worldwide. But I mean, as a merchant, I think everybody you want to have as many payment methods as available that actually can scale with your customer base without adding too much complexity for what you're trying to do. So I hope that kind of answers the question there. The key thing though, I think that's a little bit unique and different you may want to speak to is Maestro. Because Maestro is extremely popular in Europe, but it's not available on all, e-commerce. Maestro.
Is that a credit card company?
It's part of MasterCard,
It's
so,
the debit.
Right.
yeah.
MasterCard has a debit card brand known as Maestro. And actually, Visa has a separate debit card brand known as Electron. But the differences are ultimately subtle. The big difference with Maestro is the way that it's deployed. In the European region, it uses a dual message system. Dual message meaning authorization occurs in one process and then settlement appearing in a separate process, a distinct process. In Latin America, we use a single message system where in a single process, settlement and clearing happen at once. That's a PIN-based system, and with a PIN-based system, it's been much more challenging to allow for e-commerce transactions. Traditionally, the thinking behind that has been, well, you have to enter a PIN in an e-commerce site, and the system won't allow that PIN. You don't want to enter a PIN, and without a PIN, you can't route an e-commerce transaction. But the reality is, issuing banks just don't like whether it's just a debit card in emerging markets. There's just a lot more risk. Debit is a relationship concern, whereas credit is a product concern. We can talk about that, separately after the panel, so that we don't diverge from the topics. I'd be happy to engage with you guys on that topic. But Maestro is a separate brand of MasterCard that's a debit brand, and today cannot be used online unless if you have full authentication using the 3D Secure protocol.
So it's mandated authentication on Maestro. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much.
Okay. Any other questions? I see another hand up there. And then we'll go to you, sir. Right there.
Hello. I deal with high-ticket items, and currently in my checkout process, I'm doing a direct bank transfer, Western Union, Global PayX, PayPal, and Bitcoin. Is there any others that I might be missing for the transactions that at the least $30,000? And for Britta, is there an API or plugin that I can plug in my website that will calculate the duty and VAT for a product?
Go ahead.
Okay. What are you selling exactly?
Automobiles.
Automobile products. Most freight forwarders and so forth, they do have, so you can plug in and get your VAT and duty really. But are you selling B2B or B2C?
B2C.
B2C. So usually you have how do you ship right now? Do you have your customer pick that up or?
Freight forwarder is shipping now.
Yes. So then you have an option of having them usually charging the duty back onto the customer, or they can charge it to you and you charge it to the customer.
Right. And right now I charge it onto the customer, but when they're checking out, I'd like to provide them with an estimate of the amount.
Yeah.
Right offhand there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is, there are a few softwares out there, and the freight forwarder should be able to tell you that, but it is, if you go to a lot of countries, it is very, very complicated to get the exact cost and rate for another. There are some softwares available to do that, usually through your freight forwarder too. But then again, you do have to look at the liability from your point of view though, because if you, that can be an issue if you ship a lot into certain countries where you really are the importer record there and sell it on to them. So the way you do it now, where you charge the duty back onto your customer, you do that, right? Yeah. It's kind of the limit there what that's legal to do if you do it a lot, actually. It can be, because if your terms are BDP to the customer, that can be a liability that you have to that country. So we can talk about that after meeting a little bit more. Yeah.
Andrew, do you is that something that would be relevant for a company like escrow.com?
Yeah, we do have an API that you can add to your checkout as well. We can talk about that after. but one of the things Paul doesn't commercial service have a VAT calculator API, or am I mistaken?
I don't think we have it on the website.
Okay. All right. So, there's probably, depending on, and again, it goes back to having all the tools in the toolkit to be able to sell to everybody. Whether it be B2C or B2B, even you can get a letter of credit for a consumer that's buying some of these things. It's just tedious to try to get into that kind of business. But you have to look at all the other tools that are available. Something of that high ticket, I would assume, even if they tried to use credit card, they don't have that open to buy. And that's issue number one right there. So there's not enough credit that they would have. And their wire transfers coming in, you can do that, but what kind of risk do you have, or they have, if you don't deliver the items? So I would assume there's got to be some sort of protection you provide for that, because that's a cash in advance payment.
Yes, exactly. And as a company, you want to build that credibility and trust among consumers. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you hear all that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Looking at your clientele, they may be, I don't know what type of cars you're selling, but it might be people that have the money, no issue to pay it, or you may need to look at something and offering a finance option for those that might need it.
And I would say that in most markets have some form of financing available. And the thing that I see is unfortunately pretty much each market has their own.
Right.
Each country
Yeah.
has their own. And so because of the regulations within the countries, how much interest you can charge and how you have to report it, etc. So it's not like there's one solution for Africa or one solution for Europe. Every single country is going to have their own way. In Europe, one thing that's been a lot easier is, and obviously if you're taking payments in USD, it might be slightly different, but SEPA, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, it's sort of a unified regulation across all of the Euro markets, all of the markets that are in Euro, which I believe is 12 or 13 countries, is that right? Or something like that? 15 maybe?
For the EU countries, or?
The Euro countries, the countries,
Yeah.
the currency Euro, yeah. 13 countries. So across those 13 countries, there's a unified regulation now around bank transfers. So you can use companies like SlimPay, and they will take care of that for you. And obviously there'll be a button you can put on your website that says SlimPay, and it takes care of all of that. But that's only for the Eurozone.